If you are a beginner drummer wanting to sound awesome on the drums and feel great on the drums, but you're afraid that you're not practicing things right, or you're potentially building bad habits that might ultimately lead to failure, then I've got you covered today. I'm sharing with you the 5 biggest skills I wish I had learned early on as a beginner drummer so that you can avoid trouble and shortcut your way to success on the drums. You can do this. Hey, welcome to the Non-Glamorous Drummer. I'm so glad you're hanging out with me today. I help beginner and intermediate players become the musicians that others actually want to play with and listen to by teaching you the core drumming skills that get you the most results in the least amount of time. So this saves you so much time in the practice room and gets you playing music and doing what you want to do on the drums. Hey, today is going to be a lot of fun because we're covering a lot here, but these are really valuable skills that I think really are going to save you a whole bunch of time on the drums. But first, before we get into that, if you're a beginner drummer, I have a special gift for you. Most likely the biggest challenges you face are number 1, not knowing what to practice, and number 2, not being able to play your favorite songs yet. But don't worry, because I've got you covered. Grab my totally free PDF e-guide called 25 Practical Rock Grooves and Fills for the Beginner Drummer. After grabbing this free guide, you will have 25 plus grooves and fills you can use in nearly every song you learn. And you'll have confidence that you can speak the language, speak the language of rock drumming and have that basic drumming vocabulary that allows you to begin jamming and sounding great quickly. And hey, here's what's cool. For today's lesson especially, this guide is actually going to give you a lot of concrete, specific things to go and practice right now in order to implement what we're talking about. So these 5 skills, you can practice every one of these 5 skills we're talking about today via what is here in this guide. So I want you to grab this guide as basically as your companion, as your take action, take this to the practice room, download it, print it off, whatever you want to do, to then put into action these 5 skills that we're going over today. I think this guide is going to complete this for you and give you a lot of great, really fun things to go and practice right now. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this. It's a really valuable, really helpful guide, so go grab it. It's a total no-brainer. All right, let's dive into today's lesson. Hey, so I'm sure we've got a lot of beginners watching this lesson today, but I know there are also some of you more intermediate advanced players, and I want to hear from you in the comments first. Those of you who have been playing for a while, you've learned a lot, I want you to tell me what is the most valuable skill you've learned on the drums that you wish you knew when you first started out. Then you beginners, once we get through today, I want you to tell me which of these 5 big skills we're talking about today you think is or will be most helpful and most valuable to you. So let's get some discussion going. All right, let's dive in. Number 1 skill. And these aren't necessarily in a particular order. I think these were all very crucial, very important for me personally, and I think they will be for you too. Number 1, use your stick's sweet spot to achieve maximum speed and smoothness on the hi-hats. So the struggle here is that a lot of times we get really tired, we get really worn out when we're trying to play. We're trying to play a hi-hat 16th groove, think Africa by Toto. There's some other Toto songs that incorporate that kind of timekeeping, Rosanna in a shuffled sort of way. Those kinds of patterns tend to exhaust our arms, and there is a lot of technique that goes into that. We can talk about in another lesson, but something that took me way too long to learn. I did not figure this out until I was probably a few years into playing professionally, was that, you know what? Where you place your stick has a huge effect on the amount of rebound and therefore smoothness, that buttery smoothness and fluidity you can get here on the hats. So if you're right here, you're not going to have a lot of that smoothness that you really need, where things are just stiff, there's not enough rebound. But if you slide your stick to about right here, so instead of using the shoulder or the shaft on the edge of the hats, use the neck. So if this is the shaft of the stick, right here where it starts to taper, if this is our shoulder, this is going to vary if you have different drumsticks. These are 5As. Then this right here, where it narrows down before the tip, this is the neck. So if you strike the edge of the hats with the neck, you actually have a much better response. There's actually a little bit of rebound there. Not a lot, but compare that to this. It's really a pretty big difference. A little bit of difference goes a long way. And so if you're right here and you make sure that you've got just enough angle that the tip is not hitting the hats, but the neck is. So you don't want to be here, but you also don't have to be way down here. Aim for about right here. And that's going to give you a great response, a great feel. You'll find that if you want that quick, just flowing along, not cumbersome, not heavy hi-hat sound, this is the way to do it. Now, if you ever want to throw in an open note or make it feel heavier, you can always change. This is not black and white. If you're trying to play quickly though, this is where you want to be. But if you want to throw in an open note, that's where you want to dig in a little bit more. So change your stick position accordingly. If we're going for volume and attack and emphasis and accent, that's where we want to dig in more. Steepen our angle and really dig in with the shaft or the neck. But when we're trying to float along nicely and lightly, we want to be right here. What can help too is lowering your hi-hats. A lot of drummers have their hats too high. If you lower yours, this is how high mine are. If I have my stick here on my practice pad on the snare, the edge of the hats are about at the American flag here on Vic First sticks. I think that's about 5 or 6 inches. So I do have my hats fairly low compared to a lot of rock drummers. This is probably not low for a jazz drummer. If you're playing jazz, it's nice to have them lower because you spend more time on top. But play around with that. Figure out how high do my hats need to be to get me that optimum angle comfortably. And for me, it's right here. So that was a huge deal. I struggled through so many hi-hat 16th songs for years with my arm getting tired and it not feeling right, not because I was doing a wrong technique or lacked the strength, but because I simply didn't have my stick in the right spot. So this is a quick win, an instant win. Make this adjustment. It's going to help you out a bunch. It's going to save you a lot of hours and years of frustration. So go try this out. Number 2, use the rimshot grip for more pro-sounding grooves. So let me explain this one a little bit. This will definitely apply to you if you like playing rock stuff, if you like playing loud and heavier kinds of beats. The opposite of this would be like jazz. If you're playing like jazz stuff, this doesn't necessarily apply. But I know a lot of us are trying to play rock, we're trying to play pop, country, those kinds of styles of music, worship music if we're playing in church. And if we're wanting to play loudly and have a great feeling groove, think John Bonham. If you want to have a great big rock and roll John Bonham kind of groove, you've got to play rimshot backbeats on the snare rather than hitting in the middle. It gives you more attack, a more full sound. And this was something that a drumming mentor of mine years ago taught me, and he told me, hey, if you really want to have a great, just deep pocket, heavy kind of feel to your playing that just, lays it down, you've got to have those rimshot backbeats when you're playing loudly. It also helps balance out the kit more so that the snare doesn't get drowned out by cymbals. So I had to start practicing my rim shots, and eventually I got pretty decent at them. But there was one missing piece of the puzzle that I did not realize until a couple years after that, I think. I was struggling to play my rim shots well. I'll show you here exactly what I'm getting at. So I'm going to throw a towel over the top of the snare, muffle it down. So here's what it sounds like if I hit in the center with no snares on. Now here's a rim shot. Big difference. Now, what it took me a while to realize, I remember the moment that I realized this. If you're gripping your stick about right here, it's very difficult to play a consistent rim shot. This grip right here, where we're gripping on the stick, is optimized for rebound. Because the further toward that balancing point you grip your stick, the lighter of a feel you get. So if you're playing very softly, this is not a bad place to grip. But if you're playing loudly, not so much, especially rim shots. If you're doing rim shots, really you need to grip down here, very close to the butt end, which gives you more throw and gives you the ability to really play a nice rim shot. And that was something that just did not occur to me for a long time. And I remember one Sunday morning playing at church, I even remember the specific song. Maybe you know this if you played in church years ago and you actually remember some of the old classics. This song was called Sing to the King. We were playing this song, Sing to the King. And I remember during rehearsal, it felt awful, and I couldn't play the rim shots well for my backbeats. And then during the service, it felt great. And it suddenly occurred to me, oh, just now I was gripping here. In rehearsal, I was gripping here. It's amazing how much that little bit of difference makes. But if you want to play consistent rim shot backbeats, boom, boom, whatever amount of, rim versus center, we can get into all the nuance of that. But if you're wanting to play rim shot backbeats where the tip lands in the middle of the drum, the shaft hits the rim, right about here. Grip closer to the end. That's going to give you more throw, a better feel. And also if you're using bigger sticks, so these are 5As, but if you're using 5Bs, that's going to make it even easier to just lay into the drum. You'll get a really consistent sounding rim shot that way. And as for practicing them, this is how I like to practice them. This is how I first practiced rim shots. Turn your snares off, lay a towel across the top. That way you can really hear what the rim shot sounds like. And you can hear a huge difference between center and rim shot. And you can hear the degree of rim. Like if I go more rim, like that, going ga-ga, as the sound got higher, it was kind of more rim, versus if I lean a little more towards center. There you could hear is a little more center than rim. So there's all sorts of nuance, subtlety you can get into here. This is why every drummer's rim shots sound a little bit different. And it's hard to make yourself sound just like a particular drummer you hear on a record, because that drummer might be playing his or her rim shots a certain way, different from you. So you never know. So practice doing this. Practice just hammering out rim shots, gripping down here, while staying relaxed. Don't get super stiff, but turn your snares off, put a towel across the top, and just sit here and practice playing them. That way you develop that muscle memory. And then of course do it with right hand too. Think of it more as throwing the stick into the drum, not trying to hammer it, just throw the stick into the drum. You'll be fine. This will help you out a lot. It'll save you a lot of frustration. If you're trying to play loudly, you want to sound like Bonham, you want to have steady, consistent backbeats that feel great and that really drive the band. This is how to do it. Skill number 3, play faster, smoother, with less pain and better sound by using this bass drum technique. And this technique is bouncing the beater instead of burying it. So here we get into the kind of controversial territory. I buried the beater for a long time, where I would play like this. And if you have a big bass drum and you have it tuned fairly low, burying feels pretty natural because you can just, press the beater into the head. There's not a lot of rebound off of it. Now, if you have a smaller bass drum like mine, this is a 20-inch, and you got it tuned up a little bit, then the beater kind of wants to bounce off, and it's easy to accidentally go where it gets that flutter. So in this case, it really makes more sense to bounce. You get more fullness, more beef. I've got other lessons going in depth with this, but I just want to share with you this quick technique here, because this is something I wish I learned early on, because I used to play a lot of 3-hour, 4-hour cover gigs all the time, especially before COVID and before having kids, and so I was out gigging every weekend. And what would happen by about midnight, 1 a.m. or so, of course, I'm getting kind of tired. I've been playing for a long time. I've been playing loudly on the kick, because if you're playing rock, you should be pretty strong on the kick so that it can be heard over the cymbals and all the other drums. But I was burying the beater every note I played. Now what you'll notice, if you sit here and you bury the beater, you feel the shock wave of that hit go up your leg, through your knee, and if you have your foot pretty far up the foot plate and you're sitting pretty close, that becomes exhausting. What was happening by the end of the night was I'd get up from the kit, walk off the stage, and I'd be hobbling for a minute or so just because my knee was hurting. I'd actually worn my knee out, plus I was tearing up my shoes because my feet were running into the chain. So 2 big adjustments I had to make to overcome that. Maybe this is you if you've been playing for a while, but if you're a beginner, I hope to spare you this. I don't want you dealing with knee pain. I want you to be relaxed, just as relaxed down here as up here with your hands. So sit a little further back if you need to, and this applies to heel up or heel down. Whether you're playing heel up or heel down, give yourself some space so your foot's more about right here on the foot plate. That way you can bounce the beater. It's as simple as that. Instead of burying it, let it bounce back. You'll get a better sound and your leg will stay more relaxed as a result. Number 1, this will save your knees. It will save you joint pain. It'll reduce all the shock going into your joints. Number 2, it will give you more fluidity and smoothness. I'll show you why in just a second. Number 3, it will provide better sound quality, because you don't want to choke out the drum you're playing. You're going to get a fuller sound out of it if you let the heads resonate. So let the heads resonate, bounce the beater off. Here's how to practice this. So grab your beater like this, and then just let it go. Notice the tempo it's bobbing at. Practice air playing at that tempo. Just sitting here and letting your beater move, air playing. What you'll find is that without much effort, you can keep a pretty steady tempo here. Then as you let it start hitting the head, what's really cool is that it's not hard to keep this steady. It's naturally going to stay steady because there's a motion in place. Just like if you're going like this, stick's going up and down, you've established a motion which helps you stay in time. Same with your foot. It's naturally going to stay in time because there is a motion. Now, if you're trying to bury the beater, there's not really ever a motion because you're halting that motion. The motion starts, and then suddenly it stops, and then you're having to resume it. Anytime you have something jagged and awkward and sudden like that, it's going to be harder to play smoother and in time. I'll show you what I mean. You may have seen me do this in other lessons before. We've talked about this a lot on the channel. But if I want to play something like this, everything feels stiff and clumsy because I'm burying the beater and I'm staying all choked up right here on the head. But what if I take that approach from our beater bobbing test here, where we practice going like this? What if we just let the beater move freely and openly as we're playing? Suddenly my foot's keeping better time and I'm not having to try harder. All you've got to do is practice doing this, get used to the feel of ghosting it. So first ghost it where it's not even touching the head, then let it start touching the head slightly, gradually get louder. Just get used to that bouncing kind of motion. And you'll notice how when I was playing my example groove there, the beater comes back to rest right here. If I bounce and then rest it, see, it comes back to there. It's bouncing and then it's coming back. So we're not trying to make it bounce and then stay back here. We're not trying to go bah, bah. That'd be awkward. It's okay for it to come back to rest right here in its natural position. But the idea is we're now in a motion. Boom, boom, boom. There's no awkward sudden stops. We're not slamming a brick wall. That way everything has a flow to it. I want you to try this. It's going to really help you out a lot. And if you do this from square one, especially if you're a total beginner and you do this from square one, it's going to help you out so much. Sit a little further back from your drum, especially if you're playing heel down, so you've got the space to do this. Make sure your leg, if this is your thigh, this is your calf, if this is your foot down here, make sure you've got greater than a 90-degree angle. You don't want to sit like this. Make sure you've got some nice spread here. If you're playing heel up, try to sit a little higher. Just make sure everything feels natural and relaxed, and you'll be fine. Don't sit too close like I did. Don't cramp yourself up, and don't bury that beater where it's causing knee pain. We don't want knee pain. So number 4 here, number 4 skill first. This is what I call the wrist twist. Learn the wrist twist and the subtle arm motion that makes kit navigation a breeze. Literally just this. If you're going to move around your kit smoothly, use your wrist so you can do that better rather than having to move your arm. And there's kind of a few layers to this because we can also talk about the concept of pulling the sound out. So really this is twofold. Step 1, we want to be able to pull the sound out of drums. So create an artificial rebound. I've got a lesson dedicated to artificial rebound. I'll link below for more detail on this. But the problem with going from a practice pad or a snare to the full kit is a lot of times suddenly we lose all of our rebound. We feel a little bit lost and not sure how to handle that. So we want to establish some sort of motion where we're lifting the stick out. And that automatically signs us up for better kit navigation. That's what's cool. If we're playing down here on the floor tom like this, like that, and not having the big rebound, it's going to be hard to go from here to here. Right, it's all stiff and awkward. But if we have this artificial rebound, so we're hitting, then we're lifting the stick out. Number 1, that's giving us a motion, which means steadiness and smoothness, just like we talked about down here on the bass drum. Number 2, it gives us the ability to say, okay, we're going to, instead of bouncing straight up from here, we're going to go ahead and bounce on our way over to the rack tom. And suddenly it's very natural and smooth, even if we're not playing very hard. Tapping very lightly, just gently tapping, pulling the sound out. This applies if you're playing very loudly, but also very softly. And so that's the first thing, be doing that. Go check out that video for more detail on this. Second thing is twist your wrist to allow you to even more easily go from drum to drum. And this especially applies going from snare to floor tom. Because if we've got basically our German grip, our palms down grip here, then we can automatically flip to a more French grip, thumbs up grip right here by twisting over. That allows us to move to the ride more easily, to the floor tom more easily. And we can also, vice versa, if we're down here on the floor tom, we can, with our left hand, flip over to a more thumbs up grip to come over here to the crash, or the rack, or the hi-hat. And so you always want to think in these twisting motions so you can more easily take advantage of what your body's capable of doing. Sure, we could use a bunch of arm, or we could try to bend our wrist weird, but let's not do things we don't need to do. Let's try to stay as relaxed as we can with as little arm motion as we can to achieve as much stick motion as we can. So that's kind of the idea here. We want to see how can we work as little as possible to get as much motion as possible. And that's really the secret to being relaxed and having a lot of that fluidity. And that really helps you get from looking and sounding amateur on the drums to really looking and sounding pro with great feel, knowing what you're doing. Something else you can do, if you're playing on the snare like this, you can move to this position to go to the rack tom. That way we're not having to move our arms super far because we're just repointing our sticks. It's almost like going from kind of a German palms down right here to kind of moving toward French, but not all the way. Just doing a slight wrist rotate up to here. And of course we could go French, German, thumbs up, palms down. Likewise over here we can go palms down, thumbs up, palms down, thumbs up. We do have to move our arm to go right hand, rack to floor. Of course there are arm motions we have to do. We just want to minimize that. Really the smallest potential arm motion is going from snare to floor tom. Remember, this applies to soft playing and loud playing. So literally just practice that. There's not like a magic specific exercise here. Just practice going from drum to drum. Practice going from snare to other surfaces. So that's a good way to do it. Snare is your home base, so practice going snare tom, snare floor, snare rise, snare crash, etc. Do that with each hand. Figure out how many different places are there you can go from your snare on your kit and practice each of those. It's so simple. It sounds ridiculously simple. Like, why would I actually practice that? But that is the core key to being able to move around the kit well, and knowing your kit, like knowing your instrument, knowing where everything is, knowing where to reach, knowing how to get places. And you can actually optimize, move things around on your kit as you're doing that. Like if your rack tom's hard to get to, move it closer, lower it, tilt it towards you more. Don't have it in a weird place. Tilt your floor tom a little bit toward your snare, but a little bit toward your rack so it's easy to get to and bounce off of. Just think logically about this. Adjust everything so that it makes sense. And then additionally, practice that artificial rebound, which you can do by either air playing. You can actually practice just air playing, which we talk about in that other video I'm linking below for more detail, or practice playing on your leg like this, where instead of hammering into our leg, because that starts to hurt after a while, instead of that, we're lifting the sticks up just like this, so we're creating a motion. The same thing we would do air playing. Because if we're air playing, the stick comes down, the butt end hits our palm and stops it, then we have to bring it back up. We can just apply that same motion to our leg. And that is the exact thing that we want to apply to low rebound surfaces, or just to any rebound surfaces for smooth navigation, because it means we're always thinking in terms of where are we going next. Okay, number 5, our last one. And I think this one might be my favorite. Maybe there is an order to this. Maybe there's a reason why I saved it for last, because I think this is really cool. Keep automatic time with your left foot on the hi-hat. The technique that makes this possible, which I call the leg bounce, because that's simply what it is. It's just the leg bouncing. When I first started playing, and even as I was starting to get into professional playing, I would notice other drummers keeping time with their left foot. But I was realizing, wow, that takes a lot of coordination. It's really hard to keep my left foot going while I'm playing other things over here. And besides, my left foot's getting tired, and also I'm having to have my hi-hats closer to me than my bass drum so that I can easily access them with my hands, which makes it really hard to keep playing heel down because I'm getting really sore right here. I was running into a lot of challenges with that. Thankfully, because I wasn't smart enough to figure this out on my own, I happened to, beginning of music school in college, I was just jamming with some new music student friends in the band room at school. And we were playing, and one of the guys who was playing guitar was also a drummer, and so we were trading off, and he sat down in the kit and started playing. And I was watching him play, and I realized, hey, he's just keeping time there with his hand. He was playing something like this. I thought, wow, that looks so effortless. And I realized, oh, he's playing heel up, and he's just got his leg bouncing, and he's getting consistent chicks that are just perfectly in time there that way. So then I sat down. I was like, hey, I got to try what you were doing there. So I started trying it out, and I realized, you know what, I can do this, because I had practiced up to that point a lot of, left foot on 2 and 4, left foot on the and, some different basic timekeeping from realistic rock. That was a method I worked through a bunch. And so I had some basic left foot coordination there, but I just couldn't keep it going. And it required too much thought. I realized when doing this, oh, this doesn't require much thought. And with a little bit of practice, I can get this on autopilot. So I worked at it, and it didn't take long before I just didn't have to think about it. that changed everything because suddenly I could keep eighth note time or and time. I could keep faster time with my left foot so that I could free up my right hand to play anything else. I could do anything else with my right hand and essentially have a hi-hat chick sound coming from my left foot, and I wasn't having to think much about it. So yes, there's some basic coordination that goes into this, but you'll get it. What I want to focus on right now is just a 4-step process to how to do this. It's not complicated. Once you learn some basic muscle memory, build some new habits here, you'll be just fine. So first thing, practice just bouncing your left leg while keeping your toes planted. So you could do this just on the floor. Practice having your big toe planted on the floor and you're just bouncing your heel up and down. So leg is going up and down, but you're keeping your toes. You could either try to imagine this is your foot. Keep just your big toe planted or keep this whole part of your foot planted. You could go like that, or doesn't matter too much right now. Just practice keeping toes on the floor and at least that front part of your foot on the floor while bouncing your heel. Just get the feel for that. This is not very unnatural. It's just like if you're sitting in a chair and you're cold or you're nervous and you're gonna bounce your knees like this. That's literally all that you're doing. It's a very natural motion that is not difficult. Now, number 2, apply that to the hi-hat stand. So put your toe probably about right here at this point. Allow a couple inches between your toe and the chain on the hi-hat stand. And now just do that bouncing motion on the hi-hats. You might start to barely hear some chicks, but you shouldn't hear anything yet if you're keeping your toes planted. What I'm doing here is basically planting my big toe. All the pressure is on my big toe, my heel's going up and down. Now it feels kind of weird with my shoes off. I'm just doing this to demonstrate. I'm gonna put my shoes back on so I've got some better grip here on the foot plate. So I'm just bouncing up and down, keeping my big toe planted. Now number 3, allow your toes to gradually lift. So the toe pressure decrease just a little bit on that up motion. So then you start to get a chick sound. So we're going from this, where we're keeping our toe planted, we're hinging our foot, to then gradually actually allowing the foot plate to lift. This is the thing to focus on really, because this is a little bit tricky at first, but just practice pivoting up and down and gradually crescendoing, gradually getting louder, slightly louder with your chicks. Now you'll hear some splashing in between. Hopefully not that much, but you'll hear, some slight splashing in between the chicks. That's totally fine. What you want to do is close them very quickly, open and close them very quickly. Instead of going like this, then you end up with splashing where it's more of it like that. What you have to do to make sure that it sounds like a chick is close them so they stay closed long enough to be, silent and then open. Because if you go from totally closed to open, silence, right? But if you close them and then you quickly open back up, it's a splash, obviously, because it activates both cymbals, they're both vibrating, and they come apart, so we have a splash. So what you have to make sure you're doing is closing long enough that they close, they stop, silence, then open back up. That way you don't have the splashing in between. Now, as you get faster, this becomes impossible to do. Watch this. There it goes. You start hearing some splashing because they can't stay closed long enough because we're going too fast. And now there's definitely splashing there. What we have to do is start decreasing our cymbal distance, decreasing our stick height, so to speak. Because if we use our full openness here, we get too much splashing. But if we allow them to only open to about right here, then we can go pretty quick and minimize splashing. That's what you'll find. If you want to play good splashes, have your hi-hats open pretty far apart. That's pretty loud, and it's pretty cool how you can get that full sound just with your foot. This is really cool, really powerful to have all of that going on right there with your left foot. So have some spacing there. But if you're doing chicks and you're trying to go faster, allow that spacing to gradually decrease from here to there. So then practice doing this while playing a basic slow groove, and then practice this in songs. Just add it into basic grooves you know. Grab that E-guide I told you about, the 25 practical rock grooves and fills for the beginner drummer. Just take some of those basic first few eighth note grooves there and practice adding in the leg bounce eighth notes, going nice and slow. Gradually you'll be able to get it faster and faster. Of course, be patient with that as you're practicing it. It may not come instantly. This might be something that you do figure out instantly if you already have some prior experience building a little bit of coordination there with the left foot. But otherwise, it's still not impossible. It might feel weird at first. You might not be able to imagine yourself actually doing this. You might not be able to conceive of it in your head. But be patient with it and practice that bouncing motion. Start incorporating that into what you're already playing, what you already know. And you'll really be able to do a lot with this. And ultimately, it will liberate your right hand so you can play all sorts of other stuff while still getting all sorts of time and pulse and drive just from your left foot. It's very cool what your left foot can do on the hats when you train it. So as we wrap up, I want to know in the comments below, what is the single most valuable skill you've ever learned on the drums? I know I'm not speaking directly to beginners in asking this question. If you're a more intermediate player or an advanced player who's tuned in today, I want to know from you, what is the most valuable thing you've ever learned that's really helped you out the most? Maybe it's one of these things. That'd be cool. Maybe it's something totally different that I've forgotten about. Let me know. And if you're a total beginner and you're learning these things for the first time, I want you to know which of these 5 skills do you think is or will be most helpful to you? Which of these things do you envision yourself going to your drums right now and practicing and really getting some results from? Or maybe you've been sitting at your kit as you've been watching this lesson, which is fantastic. I love hearing about you guys who do that. You guys and you gals who are at your kit and you're like taking action and you're practicing as you're watching. Maybe you've at least got your practice pad in your lap. That's awesome. So maybe you've already been testing some of this out. What's working well for you? Which of these is your favorite? What is creating the most change and just creating the most possibility in your playing? Very cool how liberating these things are and how you realize, you know what? I can do this. When you've got the right tools, when you know how to do things the right way, everything gets easier. So I hope this gives you the tools and the resources and the potential to really grow fast and really jumpstart your playing and be able to, circle around all of these issues that I had to deal with for a long time in my playing. I hope to shortcut that and really get you towards success quickly so that you're not only playing your favorite song soon, but you're also able to do whatever you want to on the kit. We want to have freedom. I want you to have freedom on the drums to express yourself, to be creative, to improvise, to make up things, and to sound awesome doing it. And all of these 5 things here today are key to ultimately doing that. So take action on this, practice this, let me know how it goes. Be sure to grab that 25 practical rock grooves and fills for the beginner drummer e-guide, because that's going to give you a lot of concrete things to practice too. If you're not sure about how to specifically take action on today's lesson, go grab that guide, because that gives you some specific fills to practice, which is awesome, but also a lot of basic grooves. And you can work on your left foot timekeeping with those particular grooves. You can work on your hi-hat 16ths, getting that proper smooth buttery hi-hat sound with those grooves in the guide. You can work on your rim shots with those grooves in the guide. So if all of this today is the what, and I've also broken down, how to do all these things, but as far as taking action, the practical application, grab that guide. That way you've got a bunch of specific grooves to work through and learn and practice implementing what we've talked about today, including bouncing the beater. Almost forgot about that one. Bouncing the beater. So you can implement and work on all of this in working on the stuff that's in that guide. So go grab the guide, 25 practical rock grooves and fills for the beginner drummer. Going to give you some concrete, really valuable, useful stuff to practice so that you know your drumming vocabulary. You can piece together the essentials to play 95+% of your favorite songs. So have fun with that. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to help you out a bunch. All right. You can do this. You can do these things. Take action, practice, be patient. Let me know how it goes. Thanks for hanging out today. This has been a lot of fun. I know this has been one of those long, detailed kinds of lessons. I label this, when I'm brainstorming lessons, I label this type of lesson as a comprehensive lesson, because we're not covering one thing. We're covering like 5 different things and trying to go as in-depth as we can while not spending 2 hours here. So I'm glad you hung out with me today. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you have a great week. I'll see you on the next lesson. Stay non-glamorous. You can do this.